Good morning. Good morning. I am Ted Rall, and that over there is not Manila Chan. That is Robbie West, our producer, sitting in. Manila Chan is out again today. She's really sick as a dog. So it sort of fits in with the theme of today's show, which is about health insurance horror stories, and we'll be getting into that. But Manila, for those who are wondering, and she's going to hopefully be okay. She has pleurisy, which is a very painful infection of the area between your lungs and the sort of muscle lattice that protects your lungs, as well as pneumonia. So it's like, a pair. Hopefully it won't become a trifecta, but she's finally on some antibiotics, and hopefully those will do the trick. And maybe with some luck, she'll be back on Monday. We're just telling her to sleep very well. You're tuned in, of course, to the Ted Manila Information Show, TMI for short, where we will bring you way too much information. Everything from the news, politics, lifestyle, culture, plants, animals, what the kids are up to, insurance, non-insurance, subways, buses, the taboo, the occult, cats, dogs, anything and everything goes, because we believe you could never have too much information. If you do want that straight-laced button-down news program, go away. We don't want you. This show is not for you. It's stuff that you know you want to hear about, and maybe some stuff you never knew you needed to know, and hopefully we'll have a few laughs along the way. We are live here Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. here in the Eastern time zone, but don't worry, you can stream us all day long, all weekend long, so it's, don't get confused by the whole live thing. I think people don't realize that these live shows are also available. This is not just ours. They're all available for streaming later. Anyway, the Ted Manila Information Show starts now. Now, at this point, we would normally have the Jaws, Robbie, but we don't have the Jaws. We are going to be talking about health insurance horror stories. So if you are in the Rumble or the YouTube chat and you have a health insurance horror story, hey, come on. You do, because you live in the United States, probably, if you're watching us. Put it in succinctly and clearly, and we'll read it and react to it on the air here in just about 25 minutes or so. So it gives you a little bit of time to get your writing chops up, and away we go. All right, so let's do some headlines here. All right, so it's headline news. Okay, first of all, following up our story from earlier this week, South Korea's ruling party leader says President Yoon Suk-yeol needs to be removed from power. That's for trying to impose martial law for about 6 hours, increasing the pressure on him to quit, even though members of his People Power Party late Friday reaffirmed its formal opposition to his impeachment. On Saturday, lawmakers will vote on the main opposition Democratic Party's motion to impeach. Yoon, of course, shocked the nation on Tuesday and late at night when he gave the military emergency powers to root out what he called anti-state forces to overcome obstructionist political opponents. Yoon rescinded his declaration about 6 hours later in the middle of the night, 4 o'clock in the morning, local time there in Seoul, after the parliament, including some members of his own party, voted against it. That's in the Korean constitution, that the president's martial law order has to be approved by parliament. The conservative PPP vowed to oppose the impeachment bill, a position it reaffirmed on Friday following a lengthy meeting of its lawmakers, at least some of whom would need to back it for the motion to succeed. Acting Defense Minister Kim Seon-ho said reports that had swirled throughout Friday that there might be another attempt to impose martial law over this coming weekend are not true. PPP leader Han had earlier added fuel to those rumors and suggested the party's stance on impeachment might be shifting when he said there was a high risk of extreme actions, such as this emergency martial law being repeated while Yoon remains in power. He also cited credible evidence that Yoon had on Tuesday intended to arrest and detain political leaders at Gwacheon, that's just south of Seoul, and called for Yoon's immediate suspension. He did not explicitly call for impeachment or respond to reporters when asked for clarification. Robbie, I'm not an expert on South Korean politics, but I don't think, as Bob Dylan said, you have to be a weatherman to know which way the wind is blowing. And I think it's pretty clear that, he's toast.
I agree. And one thing is kind of throw this out there. My dad was a Korean War veteran. He was actually there in Korea through the 3 years of that particular conflict. And no, as you know, the entire purpose is to defend South Korean democracy from the dictatorship of North Korea. And after the Korean War, South Korea promptly became a dictatorship of the South Koreans. And so my dad was just kind of like, I really don't know what we were doing fighting for. It made no sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. Well, it wasn't about freedom versus a dictatorship or authoritarianism, as we're so often told, right? Very clearly, it was about socialism versus capitalism.
Sure.
And nothing terrifies, or at least during the Cold War. I mean, I think it's still true. I don't think really anything's changed. I think what terrified the powers that be in the West and in the United States in particular about socialism was the idea that here, in the form of communist China and the USSR and all of their allies, Cuba and so on, was this idea that the world could be a different place, that like it could have a completely different model where, the elites would truly be working for the people, or at least that would be the theory, right? That's what we hope happens. And that it would be and that we would have a society where the ideal is that everybody's created equal, and like if things get corrupt, they get corrupt from there, as opposed to the capitalist system, which is you start with the ideal that we are all unequal and don't deserve the same things out of life, and then it gets corrupt from there. I would argue, as a lefty, of course I'm biased here, but I would argue that the socialists have the better ideals. Even now, you can talk about execution. That's a different question.
Sure. Well, I mean, no, I think that's completely right. I mean, even in the founding documents of this country, I mean, the entire concept is that all men are created equal, and the man who penned those words owned human beings who are less than human. So, I mean, there's always some kind of hypocrisy that's always baked into anything that people do. That's just, I don't know. I guess just probably a part of the human condition. And just kind of going back to my dad real quick, not long before he died, I had the chance of going back to Pensacola and visiting him, and we were at McDonald's, talk about the nice capitalist system, that model, and we were sitting there and we were having a breakfast, and this little Korean lady came up. She was maybe 20. She's in her early 20s, and my dad was wearing a Korean veteran hat. And one of the times I ever saw my dad cry, she came up and said, "Sir, may I give you a hug? Thank you." And so, I mean, that was, for him, I think that helped solve, I think that helped him kind of just smooth over some of those rough patches. Because when you're told you have to go fight, you got to go fight the other person over there, or you be fighting them over here, and then you see what happens. But then you actually have just a normal person come and say, "Hey, thank you." That, at least for him, that helped him a lot.
I mean, that's a cool story. My grandfather, who was in the French Resistance, I was with him when a Jewish guy approached him in the streets of Paris and thanked him for saving his life too. That's amazing moment. The Korean War is a super interesting conflict. I mean, aside from the TV show MASH, it's kind of like totally falls between the cracks of our popular consciousness, right? We don't talk about it really much at all. And yet it's so important because it's sort of the template for all, World War II being the quote unquote good war, where certainly we may not have set out to do a lot of good, but we did do some good inadvertently by liberating, Western Europe and so on. It's after that, kind of every war that follows is like Korea, right? It's like we go somewhere very far away, where really there's no threat whatsoever to us. Yep. We get involved in a culture and in a political situation that we don't know much about. We choose sides. Maybe it's the right side, maybe it's the wrong side. The war ends ambiguously without a clear victory. Literally, technically, North and South Korea are still at war legally to this day. I don't think it's safe to say that America won that war. Really, we didn't lose it either. But
Yep.
sort of you'd have to ask, like, well, what was the point of this? I think you'd be hard pressed to find even a Korean War historian who'd be able to tell you that it was anything other than just a chapter in the Cold War. And it's a proxy war. It's a classic kind of like, I mean, in many ways, how is the Russo-Ukrainian conflict really different from from the Korean War? They're kind of very similar.
Well, it's not. They're trying to make. They're trying to make Ukraine, by their own definition, into. Trying to make Korea into not Korea. Trying to make Ukraine into Korea 2.0. Trying to freeze a conflict. Trying to just control it there. And a lot of people don't realize World War III almost started in Korea. I mean, MacArthur wanted to nuke the Chinese. Yep. So I mean, it was just. So I mean, it could have been really. It could have been a lot worse than what it turned out to be.
Well, that's for sure. I mean, there was after the Tet Offensive in Vietnam in 1968, General Westmoreland wanted to nuke Hanoi, and until it was pointed out to him that would probably be a bad idea because North Vietnam, had a mutual defense treaty with the USSR, which would have required the USSR to attack the United States with nuclear weapons in such an event. So it would have been unwise.
No, completely agree. And okay, just real quick. One of the things I think that Trump really did. That I don't like Trump. I'm far to the right of Trump. But whenever he went to North Korea and actually tried to make peace, I mean, massive kudos for him on that.
Oh, I agree with that. I mean, I don't understand this whole concept that seems to be mainstream in American diplomacy, particularly on the Democratic Party. That it used to be the Republicans who talked this way, but now it's the Democrats. That like talking or diplomacy is like a reward for quote unquote good behavior. No, you talk in order to talking is as Churchill said, better to talk to jaw than to war. It's like you talk because that's smart. And you should always
no money in that.
We should have open relations. Well, that's right. We should have open lines with every single country and every entity on the planet. Believe it or not, I think it would be a good idea for the State Department to have a line to ISIS. I mean, we should be talking to everything and everyone all the time.
Yep, I'm right there with you.
Okay. Speaking of which, they took Aleppo in less than 3 days. Now the city of Hama, a crucial point on the road to Damascus, and the regime of President Bashar al-Assad has also fallen, who are the Islamist rebels of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the driving force between a lightning offensive that has caught the Syrian regime so utterly off guard. The Organization for the Liberation of the Levant, by the way, is the area which currently comprises Syria and Lebanon, more commonly known by its initials HTS, was the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda before dissociating itself in 2016. By the way, before that, that was ISIS. The group owes much to its strategically minded leader, Abu Muhammad al-Golani. This Syrian fighter, a former member of the Islamic State in Iraq, which later expanded into the Islamic State group, aka ISIS. ISIS stands for Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, founded the al-Nusra Front in 2012 before pledging allegiance to Al-Qaeda in 2013. The two groups reportedly severed ties by mutual agreement 3 years later. You do you, we'll do us. On January 2017, the former al-Nusra Front began trying to remake its image, declaring that it had undergone an ideological transformation and adopted its new name, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. The group also began to rid itself of some of its most radical figures, or not. At the start of 2019, HTS fighters took control of most of Idlib province, that's in Syria's northwestern part of the country near the border with Turkey, to the detriment of other rebel groups active in the area. In a 2013 interview with France 24's Wassim Nasser in Idlib, the leader Abu Muhammad al-Golani said that he was working to ensure that the areas under his control wouldn't be used as rear bases for preparing any attacks against the West. Abu Maria al-Khatami, one of the group's leading figures, also interviewed in Idlib, said that the group was doing all it could to stop the youngest men from joining Al-Qaeda or ISIS, by showing them that another path was possible with what had been put in place in Idlib. Not only has the HTS group broken ties with al-Qaeda, but it's been fighting al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group on an equal footing for years, Nasser says, describing HTS as a rigid, conservative Islamist group. It was even their fighters who killed the Islamic State group's fourth caliph, Abu al-Hussein al-Husseini al-Qurashi, in August 2023, he says. Speaking on France 24, Arthur Kesnay, PhD candidate in political science at Paris's Panthéon-Sorbonne University, says HTS, which is now almost all Syrians, had become a group that is fighting a war and to wage a global jihad and strike at overseas targets, but is here just to take Damascus. According to Nasser, al-Ghalani maintains that he has put global jihad and international terror behind him, believing that these things bring nothing but destruction and failure. For the Islamist leader, his group has no problem with the West. His problem was with the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad, as well as the Iranians and the Russians that support it. HTS and its leader are still designated as terrorist organizations by the UN, the US, and some European countries, which of course puts a crimp into al-Ghani's ambitions. One of his objectives is to be taken off the international list of terrorist organizations so he can travel and become a leading Syrian political player. So, you know, this story is very interesting for a number of reasons. But to me, it's very analogous, going back 24 years, to the situation in Afghanistan, when after 9/11, the United States attacked the Taliban. And the Taliban, much like HTS, claimed to have absolutely no interests in international affairs whatsoever. They said, all we want to do is rule Afghanistan. This was Taliban 1.0, who ruled from 1996 to 2001. The US, the Bush administration, claimed not to believe that. They said that, you know, you guys harbored al-Qaeda, you harbored international terrorists, you had training camps for radical jihadi groups like radical Uyghurs, like the East Turkestan Islamic movement, which was active in Western China, the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, which was active, to be confusing, in Uzbekistan as well as Tajikistan. And the truth is, the Taliban were pretty much telling the truth. When we invaded, there were fewer than 100 members of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. All of the training camps were closed. The training camps that still existed were in Pakistan, not in Afghanistan. So, I mean, what basically the U.S. was describing a Taliban from 1998, but it was 2001 and things had changed. How likely is it that, you know, this guy is going to get, is HTS is going to be able to convey their message, hey, we just want Syria, is that cool, to the West, or is it likely to fall on deaf ears again?
It's hard to say, right? Because, I mean, from everything that I have seen, everything that I've read, they are getting support from Turkey, which is a Western ally. So, I mean, that is a statement of fact. And so you got to be able to kind of just see who's writing the checks to see what ambition it is that they're going for. I think that the reason why they're making this play over Syria, I think it's twofold. One, I think that Israel just really wants Assad to go away right now, and whatever Israel wants, Washington D.C. does. I mean, let's just be honest. That's just the fact. I think that they would very much like to have a Islamic religious regime in Damascus. And as a Christian, I got to say personally, I am opposed to that, because Assad, like him or hate him, he has done more to protect my brothers and sisters who are Christians than anywhere else in the western part of the Middle East. I mean, that's just a fact. And I think really what this is they're just trying to put pressure on Russia, which kind of leads to the question, where is the Syrian army? I mean, they do have one somewhere. I don't know where it is. They did have
one. They seem to have gotten lost.
So, yeah, I mean, did they take a left turn? They're at the 7-Eleven or what? I mean, what happened? Where are they?
That's a good question.
So I don't know. It's just weird. But I mean, to your question,
by the way, what's up with the Israelis? I want to follow up on your question. I mean, are the Israelis fucking stupid? I mean, it's like, literally, I think Bashar al-Assad is like their best friend, and they don't they don't appreciate him. They should appreciate what they have. The last
They like
thing
him so much that they bomb him.
Yeah, but I mean, they should. I mean, are they? I mean, they're idiots, right? I mean, they're not going to be. I mean, their security situation, which is of course what they're obsessed with, is like it's going to deteriorate radically if HTS comes to power.
I think that what it is, and I don't have any proof to back this up, it's just my gut from studying the history of the region. I think that they want this HTS group to go in, take out Assad, kick out the Russians, and then I think that what Israel wants to have happen, because they have such good relations with the Kurds, I think they're going to try and make Syria into a Kurdish state. I think that that's probably the math that they're going with. The HTS and Syria are going to weaken themselves enough, kick the Russians out. The Kurds are going to come in, pick up the pieces, and all of a sudden say, "Hey, look, we have Kurdistan. We have our own Kurdish state now."
I mean, but the thing is, there's not enough Kurds to make that work, right? I mean, in Syria, they already have like an autonomous zone, sort of a de facto autonomous zone that's being propped up by the West.
I wonder if the idea could be then, like in your situation, if you're right, because after they finish the genocide in Gaza, they're going to do something about the West Bank. Might be pretty easy just to move those Palestinians up to southwest Syria.
Now that sounds more like it, right? Because obviously part of the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, which we had talked about on our previous show with Sputnik, it looked like they wanted to. The Israelis planned to expel the Palestinians out into the desert in the Sinai, but the Egyptians aren't having it. They refortified the border. They've made it very clear, like, we are just not taking these people in. We're not going to validate what you're doing. We're not on board with that. Doesn't work for us. You're going to need to come up with something else. But I agree that they're going to turn their. I think under the Trump administration, the Israelis are going to be. They're going to have to wrap things up in Gaza. Trump does not want this hot war. So now the West Bank is already carved up into cantonments. Right. So that's a whole different matter. I mean, you kind of don't have to bomb the hell out of the West Bank in order to annex it.
Yep, and I agree. And one of the things I was thinking, here's a little bit of a curveball for you. Since the U.S. is playing these games that is in Syria, do you think that Russia could start trying to play nice with the Greeks, playing with that tension between Greece and Turkey to try and distract the Turks?
Maybe. I mean, I keep thinking that is such a incredibly long-standing conflict, and I keep thinking the Turks are going to want to bring it in for a soft landing, but it never goes away. No. Up until fairly recently, I've really been impressed with Erdogan's leadership, and I felt like I'm not a huge fan of the idea of Islamic nationalism in Turkey. But overall, I felt like he was a pretty canny leader. Now I'm not so sure. It seems like things are a little wobbly.
Yeah, I think I think that he is. He's looking at the collapse of his currency. He's trying to play the fence. He's just trying to straddle it, trying to have his cake and eat it too. I mean, he helps the Israelis attack the Armenians. Then he plays this crap over in Syria. And meanwhile, you got the Greeks sitting over here off the west coast of Anatolia. And if I was Putin, I'd be looking like, "Hey, Greeks, how'd you get Constantinople back? Let's see what we can do here. Let's see if I can escalate vertically, just like what the United States is trying to do right now in Syria."
Yeah, no, fair point. All right, let's keep going here. Nearly 100 former national security officials signed a letter to Senate leaders raising concerns about Trump's nomination of Tulsi Gabbard to serve as Director of National Intelligence. She's, of course, a controversial pick. Her biggest controversy was her 2017 trip to Syria when she hung out with President Assad. She subsequently declared that Assad was not the enemy, which, of course, what are the words that's true. In a letter addressed to incoming Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, and current Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York. The officials said that they were alarmed by the Gabbard nomination. The former officials urged Thune and Schumer to hold closed-door hearings to review all information available to the U.S. government about Gabbard. Several of Ms. Gabbard's past actions call into question her ability to deliver unbiased intelligence briefings to the president, Congress, and to the entire national security apparatus, the letter says. The letter highlights both the trip to Syria as well as her statements about Ukraine. Her sympathy for dictators like Putin and Assad raises questions about her judgment and fitness, the letter says. As DNI, of course, she would be in charge of 18 agencies, including the CIA and the FBI. The former officials add that, if confirmed, Gabbard would be the least experienced person to hold the position since the role was ever created. Well, the role has only been created fairly recently, I think under Bush, if memory serves, noting her lack of executive branch and managerial experience. You know, I always feel like I'm living in bizarro world when I look at the way that the nominations are being responded to. For the mainstreamers, people like Marco Rubio, that's a reasonable choice. Right. Or Ron DeSantis possibly stepping up to be the DOD head. That would be a reasonable choice. Sure. But they're both crazy warmongers. I mean, Ron DeSantis apparently sat in the room and laughed and smirked while watching rectal feeding at Guantanamo. So to me, I'll tell you, that raises questions about the fact that the guy's a fucking psychopath. Okay.
Agreed.
So, but then like Tulsi Gabbard, or like for that matter, RFK Jr., the ones that the mainstreamers are so obsessed with being like, well, those can't go through. Those are the crazy ones. I'm like, no, those are the sane ones. So Tulsi Gabbard, I mean, isn't she like a major in the military right now? I mean,
she is.
So if she's a threat to the national security of the United States, why is she a high-ranking officer in the military?
Well, my whole thing is, the last time that you and Manila talked about Tulsi and just all this hubbub, I pointed out that they are accusing her of treason, which is a death penalty offense. I mean, what they are accusing this woman of, they can literally hang her for.
Right.
And so, I mean, I'm going to show just how ignorant I am, being just a dumb inbred redneck. My family tree goes straight up. It doesn't have any forks. I know all the jokes, right? If going and talking to someone and trying to figure out a way to stop a war is unreasonable, then in this this Orwellian world we live in, that means that I have to go to Israel or go to a weapons plant in Alabama, sign an artillery shell, and then that's a reasonable act. I mean, that is completely upside down. Assad is not my enemy. If Assad is my enemy, then Mr. Thune, why is it that you're not asking Congress to declare war? It's Congress's purview.
Right. I have to thank you for bringing that up, Robbie. It's always been something that bothered me. The way that the casual way that the word enemy is tossed around, both in the media and by the foreign policy establishment of this country. And I'm talking about both parties. I mean, sure. Like an enemy, like you said, an enemy is someone that you are literally involved in an armed conflict with, and a legal one, right? Like technically, even if you have a covert war, they're not really the enemy, or at least you're not supposed to admit it. These are, basically, Assad's not even an adversary, right? I mean, Syria is not an adversary of the United States. I mean, no. What are they trying to do? How are they in our grill? They're not. I mean, you could say Russia's an adversary, although that's completely in your mind. They don't have to be. I mean, during World War II, they were an ally, and they should be again. It's just like, it's very, very messed up. By the way, as one of the Rumblers points out in the chat, Tulsi Gabbard is actually a lieutenant colonel in the military. So
gotcha.
So she, this is absurd, and I love the fact that she, they did the same thing to Jill Stein, right? Like Jill Stein attended an event where she sat at the same table. I don't even think she sat next to, but she was at the same table as Putin. It's like, sitting at a table next to someone does not mean that you're like butt buddies. Okay.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
No, one thing I want to point out is, for those of you who are watching, I'm sharing a screen with Ted. Ted is a communist.
Right.
I am not. So, I mean, it is possible to have a conversation with somebody and not be just joined at the hip with them.
Right. No, exactly.
It is possible.
It is possible. Donald Trump shook hands and talked to Kim Jong-un. I seriously doubt that Kim Jong-un's communism rubbed off on Donald Trump. I wish it had. That would have been awesome if it worked that way, but it doesn't.
Have you ever read the little booklet by Smedley Butler, War is a Racket?
Mm-hmm. I sure have.
That's what this is. America is not on a gold standard. It is on a lead standard. And the only thing that America has going forward economically is the exportation of war. And that's one of the things. Like every Friday I go to my local church and we get together for an hour and we pray. And they're talking about how great it is that these Islamists are pushing south against Assad because he's our enemy. And I had the tenacity to ask them, how has Assad ever hurt you? And the Christian minority in Syria, who's been protecting them? It's not the Islamists. So these people, they're so mentally retarded. If you can say that word, maybe that's insensitive. There's a case of cranial rectal infusion, just pure stupidity. I mean, these people will applaud. Well, it's kind of like what you said yesterday. You got these Zionist Christians who will come out and applaud the person who's putting a rope around your neck because Fox News tells you that they're the good guy, and it's sickening.
It's very strange. All right, let's keep going. Life expectancy here in the United States is expected to go up for the first time in a while, from 78.3 2 years ago to 80.4 in 2050. That, according to forecasting models from the University of Washington's Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. The analysis, published in The Lancet, assesses the impacts of hundreds of diseases and other health risks in the U.S. as well as in the individual states and compared them to a set of 200 other countries. They found that the U.S. lags in life expectancy gains, putting the country behind most other high-income nations and some middle-income nations. In terms of overall life expectancy, the U.S. is expected to fall to number 66 out of 204 countries assessed in 2050. That's down from 49th in 2022. Life expectancy among women is predicted to improve less than men's, shrinking the gap in life expectancy by gender. The U.S. would drop from 51st to 74th in life expectancy for women in 2050, and from 51st to 65th for guys. The slight increase in life expectancy that's forecast for 2050 is driven by a predicted decline in mortality due to a few causes of death: heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. But addressing a few key risk factors could make even more significant improvements, according to these forecasting models. Lower rates of obesity, smoking, and drug use disorders could each lead to about half a year increase in life expectancy by 2050. In spite of modest increases in life expectancy overall, our models forecast health improvements slowing down due to rising rates of obesity, which is a serious risk factor to many chronic diseases and forecasted to leap to levels never before seen, says Christopher Murray, director of the IHME and co-author of the new research. The rise in obesity and overweight rates in the U.S., with IHME forecasting over 260 million people affected by 2050, signals, wait, what? 260 million Americans out of 330 million total of the population would signal a public health crisis of unimaginable scale. I should say so. GLP-1 medications are booming in popularity with promising outcomes. We're talking about like Ozempic and stuff like that. But the future of uptake remains uncertain. And IHME does not include a scenario that includes these treatments as a factor. Recent data from the CDC also suggests that drug overdose deaths have started to decline after peaking out at record levels, but the group notes that the levels of drug overdoses remain high and will likely continue to go up over the next few decades. It estimates that the rate of age-standardized mortality that's going to be the name of my new punk band, age-standardized mortality, due to drug use disorders in the U.S. will be the highest in the world and more than twice as high as in Canada at second highest. Canada and the United States, both in North America. What's the difference between them? Don't know. What don't they? They have a different approach to healthcare to ours, right? Oh, but they have to wait in line sometimes to get an appointment. So that's why we're willing to die earlier or something.
Well, I mean, to kind of paraphrase Sarah Palin, I can see Canada from my house. So I don't know. One thing I have a question, and maybe Ted, I don't. Whenever they're doing these mortality figures, do they count everybody that's here, or just American citizens and not illegals?
I don't know the answer to that question, but it would seem to me that you would just count people, right?
I would think so. But
one interesting, I used to work for the traffic engineering department of my city in Ohio, and one of the things that you try to do for traffic is ideally you drive down the street and and then the light will turn green as you arrive, so that you're not constantly stopping and starting. That's the ideal traffic engineering standpoint. And I was fascinated when they trained me. They said, we went with a radar to figure out how fast cars were actually going. I said, well, shouldn't you do it to the speed limit? Because, we're the city. So shouldn't you calculate it so that if someone's going 35 and a 35, they hit the light perfectly? And they said, no. We want to know what the real world conditions are. And if people really go 42 and a 35, we want to have them hit that light at 42. That's the real world, right? I suspect if you did this correctly, you would go with the real world. You'd have to count undocumented people as well.
I would think. I just don't know.
No, I mean, I would definitely think so. I mean, the obesity thing. Look, we come back to those Trump nominations. I'll repeat this. I'm going to say this millions of times. If RFK Jr. succeeds in bringing EU standard food regulations to the United States, which reduce or eliminate the excessive use of preservatives and other garbage in our food, which is the number one reason why Americans are fat. It's not because we're a bunch of disgusting gluttons. It's because our food is poisonous and it's causing us to blow up like blimps. If he does that, it's going to be one of the biggest developments of any kind, politically, socially, medically, in U.S. history. It's a huge game changer. And, the story that we just talked about would be a great example of something that could be, eliminated.
Yeah. And to me, it makes sense, because one of the problems we're running into with military recruitment is that people are trying to join and they're too unhealthy to serve. So, I mean, it is a national security issue. And if you want to reduce the cost of healthcare, which I don't think that's a goal, but that's the lie, then you try to give people healthy food. I've never been to Europe, so I'm putting myself with your French cuisine expertise. The only French I know is French bread from Walmart. Just saying. But I mean, I like what you're saying, and I hope it's true. And I wonder if the healthcare lobby will actually allow it to happen, because they make money off people being sick.
They do. I was going to say, it's certainly in terms of I don't think this is about the food industry, right? I mean, the food industry, I think, would be fine to get these regulations. I think it's like if you're the CEO of a big Kraft or something like that, you're okay as long as the government says, okay, across the playing field, these are the rules for the entire sector, because you don't want to be like, well, you don't want to have your hands tied behind your back. And, if you have to have a certain percentage of your food rot because it doesn't get to market on time because there's no preservatives, that's got to be the same impact on your competitors. That's okay. You're right. It's big pharma, it's big medicine, it's the health insurance, scammers in Hartford, and in the case of United Healthcare in Minneapolis, it's that. All right, one more story, and then we're going to get into the healthcare. I guess here we go. The targeted killing in Midtown Manhattan here in New York of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has sparked worry in C-suites around the globe as companies, both large and small, are reevaluating. What are they reevaluating? Are they reevaluating the way that they conduct their business? Are they thinking of starting to approve the claims that they're routinely denying? Are they trying to tell their customer service people to pick up the phone more quickly, or maybe make the phone tree easier, or be more compassionate to people who are sick and their loved ones so that they get the care that they need? No. They're reevaluating their security for their top execs. Surveillance video released by the NYPD shows Thompson walking alone on a sidewalk as his killer brazenly ambushed him early Wednesday, shooting him multiple times in front of a witness. In this threat environment with increased attacks on public officials, it's surprising that the CEO of a major corporation would walk around with no security at all, says Don Mahalik, retired senior special agent for the U.S. Secret Service. Retired FBI Special Agent Richard Frankel, founder of RMF Crisis Management, said that he received several calls from companies within hours of the shooting looking to reevaluate their executive security. Some already have security, and so they're deciding if they need to increase it. And others who don't have security are saying, do we need to have some security, or do we need to at least have a policy regarding security in place, says Frankel. During a news conference, NYPD Chief of Detectives Joe Kenny confirmed that the 50-year-old Thompson had no bodyguards with him as he walked to the Hilton for a shareholders meeting. From speaking to other employees that traveled with him to New York, it doesn't seem that he had a security detail, Kenny said. Dave Commandant, president of DS Commandant Risk Management in Seattle, said that the fatal shooting prompted security officers at dozens of Fortune 500 companies to hold a video call to discuss not treating their customers well so that they wouldn't want to kill them, but to boost protection for their executives. Chief security officers around the globe are looking at their executive security programs either on their own, or they're being asked to do so by CEOs and or their boards, and making sure that they have the appropriate resources in place and capabilities in place to identify potential situations like this and then address them appropriately, said Commandant, who's a retired chief security officer at Boeing. He adds, there's a lot of, I think, stepping back and looking internally right now at what do we have in place, how well does it work, where do we feel we have gaps, and what do we need to close that gap, and what are our next steps? I got to say, if I'm in a line of work that causes everybody to hate me, and then to the point where if someone like me is blown away and the entire country is celebrating, then I might be rethinking my life, the way I'm doing things, right? I mean, I would, I'm sure privately they are. You've got to be like coming home to your spouse and saying like, I don't know about this. Is it worth it?
Well, Ted, that's because you got humility. I mean, no. To be able to recognize that maybe the problem is not those dirty peasants. Maybe the problem is how you're treating them would require a little bit of contrition, maybe a little bit of self-awareness. And that's not what our ruling class has. The problem is not them and how they're always punching down and treating people like a product and just basically just crapping all over 350 million people. That's not the problem. The problem is you dirty pleb. Get back in your lane.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that is the approach, right? Whether you're talking about climate change or increasing income disparity between rich and poor. Clearly, the plan here among the elites is to guard themselves to stay on islands, right? Like as the world collapses, they're in their gated communities. They hopscotch from, it reminds me a little bit of the last few years of Afghanistan under the Ghani regime that was installed by the United States, where 90% of the country belonged to the Taliban, and the elites of Afghanistan would fly. They would hopscotch from one city to the other because all of the in-between was completely Talibanized, right? So they would fly, they'd corkscrew up to try to avoid the Sidewinder missiles, heat-seeking missiles, corkscrew up at high altitudes out of Kabul, fly over to Herat or to Mazar-e Sharif or whatever. There were 5 or 6 cities that the government controlled-ish. And then that's how they kind of view things. I mean, these guys, they're going to have their helicopters come pick them up from their front lawn, from their estate, that's protected by razor wire and high fences and armed guards. And then, they'll fly to the shareholders meeting, land on the roof of the Hilton, then fly away, I mean, you can do that.
Sure.
Security, you can do that. But, you can ask retired President John F. Kennedy, is it really possible to completely avoid an assassin's bullet? Or ask nearly killed former president and future President Donald Trump. I mean,
Sure.
the point is, if someone wants to get, you said you haven't been to Europe, Robbie, but when you drive
Yep.
around in Europe, you see it's very everywhere, like on the side of the highway, you'll see ruined castles. Okay. Always just like walls, random walls. And you're like, so those castles, they were all stormed, right? They were
Yep.
all overrun. Every single last one of them burned to the ground, whatever, the tunnels, the walls were sapped,
Yeah.
and that's it. The point is, this, the being a fortress doesn't really work forever. It's a temporary solution. In the long run, you have to change the system that makes people want to come into your castle and kill you. You can't sustain it.
Well, I mean, isn't the story that we are told is that America is a republic, right? I mean, our leaders are supposed to be public servants. They're supposed to listen to the will of the people. Well, if that's the case, why is it that the elites never come and actually talk to the people? Why is it that Governor Gianforte here in Montana doesn't come here to Kalispell, where I am, and go to the local food bank and say, what is the problem?
That would be huge.
And why is it that the local Montanans, that local people here are being priced out of their homes? There's no jobs. They're being pushed out by rich Californians who are coming here, fleeing California because of all the drugs and the illegal immigration. So they're coming here, bringing their money, gentrifying everything, pushing up prices, destroying the local economy. But no one here in leadership, and again, I'm just talking about here in Montana. I'm sure that you can say this whole story all over the country.
Sure.
Why are elected officials not coming here and sitting down saying, Robbie, what's your problem? Ted, what's your problem? Vintage, what's your problem? Talk to me. If you would just sit down and listen, maybe you wouldn't have to worry about people getting pissed off and shooting you in the back. Just saying.
Right. I mean, actually, what surprised me about Wednesday, and I think I'm hardly alone, not an original thought, it's surprising to me that this doesn't happen more often, right? I mean, it's surprising when you think about all the people who get fired, deprived of their livelihoods. I mean, and by the way, this mentality hasn't changed. Just yesterday, watching the news, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are going to be in charge of this Department of Governmental Efficiency, the Doge department, right? Or it's really more like a squad. It's not a department. But Ramaswamy, he sounded just like the George Clooney character in Up in the Air. He talked about like laying off federal workers. And he said, we can do it, with dignity. We can do it even to the point where they're going to transition to the private sector and it'll be better for them in the long run. We can do it with dignity. I'm like, do you hear yourself? It's like this is a guy who's worth billions of dollars. He doesn't ever have to worry about money ever. But for normal people, losing your job literally means that you're weeks or months away from becoming homeless. I mean, the clock is ticking. You're fucked. I mean, your livelihood has been destroyed. I mean, it's basically like being a hunter-gatherer and have someone, break both of your arms. So now you're not going to be able to hunt or gather. Although that's different because they lived in communal societies of clans where their friends and their family would help them, right? It's like, but with us, there is no safety net really. And it's like, so what happens next? It's I don't know, the mentality, you mentioned like, why don't they come and talk to you? I mean, even in the Middle Ages, right? Kings most of them had an audience.
Yeah, they had petitioners.
They had petitioners could come and say, listen, I've got a problem with this or that. And could you please help? And, we have swamps and we're dying of malaria. Could you drain the swamps? Could, whatever. Could you please deal with, we have food shortages. We need more seeds, whatever. Our feudal lord is an asshole. Could you talk to him? It's like, there's no access, right?
Nothing.
I mean, here in New York, we do have like this, and I've seen this, right? Like a little bit. We have this call-in radio show called Ask the Mayor, and the mayor of the city, he's on the local NPR station once a week, and you can call and say like, hey, I have a problem. I did it one time. I was under Giuliani. I lived across the street from a park that had a steep embankment, and it had these stairs that were all akimbo. And a lot of old people lived in my building, and we used to we'd also walk down those crazy broken stairs, and it was rough even for someone like me, and I was pretty spry. I was in my 30s to get down those stairs. And I was like, one of my neighbors is going to fall down those stairs and break their neck. So I called, got through, talked to Giuliani, explained the situation. He said, stay on hold, we'll get your digits. The next day, the Parks Department is out there fixing these stairs that hadn't been fixed in 30 or 40 years. And I was like, that's a responsive government, right?
Yeah.
Now, it shouldn't be actually that esoteric. Because, I could have maybe not been able to get through. It shouldn't be it shouldn't be that hard. You should be able to just call a number and just say, hey, I have this problem, and then have it be fixed. But still, that's better than nothing. And nothing is what most people have.
I mean, that's exactly it, right? Because here, the town that I'm in, my town has a population in the wintertime of maybe 8,000 people. In the summertime, it goes up to about 40 because of the tourists coming in. And every wintertime, and we've had so many migrants who were brought in, and there's so much homelessness now, is that this is the middle of nowhere, all right? We have got people who are drunk and stoned out of their minds walking down Main Street in the pitch black. It's dark here at 5 o'clock. Someone's going to get hit and killed by a car, and there's no place for these people to go. And so, I mean, there is a way for them to get here, because these people are not locals. They're just here. They're getting dumped. So somehow they're getting dumped here in the winter here in Montana. They're going to die. And it's just like, there is no one to talk to. And it's a complete joke. It's a complete joke.
Well, I mean, it's terrifying. I mean, it's just like, like literally, the insanity of our society. I mean, I've talked about this many times. There's a homeless lady who lives right in front of my building. Well, across the street from my building. And I'm like, I see her every day. She's been out there for 2 years. I saw her when she first showed up, and she was like smiley and like nice. And it was one of those like, why are you out? Why are you homeless? I don't even understand like why you don't have like a job. Right. She's like totally all there. The elevator seemed to be going to the top floor, unlike our elected officials. And then it's like, and I've watched her, of course, deteriorate and decompensate to the point where she's now talking to herself. She's schizophrenic. This is what often happens, right? Like homeless, mental illness does beget homelessness, but homelessness also begets mental illness. I mean, often just house people first and they will get better. And so we all walk by there, and I'm like, the average person in this neighborhood who's walking around there, they're making like $100,000 or more a year. And it's like, we all basically, it's not that we don't care. I think we care. We stop and talk to her. We bring her food. We give her money. It's that we are helpless ourselves, like in this system to help her. I mean, we can't take her in because, who knows what it would be like to take her in ourselves. Although, I've got an extra room. I could. Would be no great shakes, no big problem really. But you've got tons of empty units in the neighborhood, but then the landlords don't know. But it's just like the system is set up that this woman sleeps outside because that's just the way it is. Yep. And it's like not just making her crazy, it's made all of us crazy too.
Sure. And I mean, that's just exactly it. And you're kind of talking about they're in your situation, then your neighborhood. Like here where I live, the median income for people here where I am is $30,000 a year. I mean, that's the average. I live in a very rural, very agricultural community. Most people probably have a high school diploma, but I'd be surprised that a significant minority don't. I mean, that's just that is the demographic here. And so now you have all these people who are coming from out of state buying up all this property. Those people, those developers, those people coming in, getting these $1 million houses with a nice view of the mountains, they get a hearing. But the people who live here, been here for generations, who aren't able to contribute $1,250 to a political campaign, they get nothing. And that's the problem.
So we have a Star Lion on the Rumble, on the YouTube feed, who's been wanting to do a Q&A thing and patiently waiting. Very true. So we should do this. So Star Lion, stay tuned. We're going to do that. I'm going to answer your question. But I want to, it's about the LA Times. So that's a long and involved story, and I promise it's not. I'm going to make it as short and sweet as possible. But let's talk about health insurance horror stories. I mean, I don't think there's anyone who has health insurance who basically. I mean, I think the only way you don't have a health insurance horror story, and I kind of often think, we might be better off as a society just going to a completely free market system where we just all pay for medical care, out of pocket. We don't have, and then doctors would be kind of competing. Presumably there probably would be like some people who would try to like some, the kind of urgent care model, which would cause everybody to, which would make everybody want to, basically try to find a cheaper way to provide healthcare. There would be an incentive in the marketplace because the current system basically is very fucked up. It's like college tuition. With college tuition, the universities know that you can borrow an infinite amount of money from the federal government and go into massive amounts of debt. So they know they can raise their tuition much faster than the rate of inflation. Similarly, big for-profit hospitals and doctors know they can keep increasing their fees indefinitely ad nauseum in order to, because they know people who are insured will be covered. And then the people who are insured, they're kind of like on the hook whether they get the insurance to cover them or not. And it's just like it spirals out of control. But, I think what I really wanted to address is the idea that there's so many people, it's routine in the United States to not go in for any preventative care and to not even seek care when you're sick because the system is so fucked up. Right now, right? Manila Chan, she's out right now. Why? So what happened? Everybody who watches the TMI show has seen her coughing up a storm. She's been sick as a dog for days, right? Why? Because she had a respiratory issue. Following her immune system was compromised by her cancer treatment. And so anyway, every little thing kicks her ass. So, you heard her here on the show a couple days ago saying, I just need antibiotics, but I can't get them. If she goes to the doctor, she knows her own health. She should be able to honestly, in a lot of countries, you don't even need a prescription to get antibiotics. In Mexico, you just walk into a pharmacy. You're like, I'll take 10 of those, and they give them to you, and that's it. And they're cheap too. They're just like $8 for a bottle or whatever. But she can't get antibiotics. I was literally trying to figure out if we could use dog antibiotics because they are the same, I think. But you need a script from a vet for that. So here's the craziness. We focus on the people who are uninsured, and they have the worst problem. But the people who are insured themselves can't get treatment because of the prescription scam. They can't get payment if they go because of the bullshit. We're just going to deny your claim automatically, and then just keep coming back and over and over. Why are the sorry, I'm sorry for the length of this rant, but there was a muckraking left-wing journalist from 100 years ago named Lincoln Steffens, and either he or Robert La Follette are both credited with the following quote. So it's hard to say who it was, but basically they said, if a man is in need of a loaf of bread to survive, you don't want to give him politically half a loaf because it'll dull his appetite, but he'll still starve to death. And I think that's what happens with the Affordable Care Act. People, they got a half a loaf. And so now healthcare is no longer on people's radar. And they think as a political issue, That's the most we're going to be able to get out of the system. And so now there's no movement towards actually getting a real healthcare system. I don't know. I mean, I keep hoping maybe Donald Trump is watching what happened to Brian Thomas and thinking, I could be a hero just for one day, and I could fix this.
I agree. And I mean, what a lot of people don't realize is that a big part of the problem with our healthcare system is that during World War II, the United States government put price controls on what people were able to earn. And so the way that companies, because they could no longer do pay raises, they tried to entice people to come work for them by bundling in benefits. Well, one of the benefits that they started bundling in was health insurance. Before World War II, the majority of your insurance was your responsibility as the individual. You're able to go, you're able to shop around, buy the plan that you wanted to have. It was not tied to your employer. World War II changed all of that. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, that created this evil trifecta, in my opinion, of linking a health insurance monopoly to your employment. And then you have government subsidies that comes on top of it, driving the prices up because why wouldn't you, right? I mean, it's a way for the company for the health insurance companies to enrich themselves. Best way to protect your profits is go buy some people in Congress. That's the best return on investment you're ever going to be able to make. And so that's the model, and that's why things are so screwed up right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. President Truman, to your point, tried to institute national health care. A lot of presidents have tried to do it since then. For a long time, the AMA, the Doctors Association, was against it, and they pushed against it in a hard way. And so they've kind of been our enemy. And yeah, it's just, and I think, that's probably the biggest problem is that, we don't even talk about it. The typical story is health insurance story is like something like, like what happened to me. I go into a hernia. I'm lying literally on the gurney, ready to be cut open.
That's wild.
And then they're like, yeah, hey, can you fish out your credit card because your health insurance has revoked its pre-authorization? I'm thinking, well, what the fuck is a pre-authorization for if you can just revoke it at the last second like this? It makes no sense at all. Of course, it makes sense from their point of view. It's just profits. But the real, probably the biggest threat is people like, who just decide, like, I'm not going to deal with it. Back in 1985, I was driving a taxi here in New York. I had an accident, and I got, it was pretty bad. Three totaled cars. The ambulance shows up because the parking lot attendant across the street on 11th Avenue called 911 and said, "There's no way anyone could have survived this accident. You take your time." But they sent an ambulance anyway, not a morgue truck. And the EMS guys are like, "Okay, it's going to be $295 just for the ride to the hospital." I didn't have that, so I was like, "Thanks for coming, guys, but I can't go." And of course they, from the look on their face, they're totally accustomed to this. This is normal. And so I just soldiered on, and I had some weird random pains in my knee and in my scalp, but I kind of just lived with it. And a year later, when I finally got a job that had decent health insurance, went in for a full workup. They x-rayed me, and I told them about all this. They were like, "Yeah, you had a pretty serious concussion. You broke your skull. I had fractured my wrist at the time. I keep thinking that maybe my wrist has been weakened ever since that event. Basically I wasn't properly treated. I guess you could say it didn't really matter because obviously here I am. But come on, there's a lot of people who just don't go to the doctor because they know they can't afford it. And how many people are not being diagnosed? The second you start to feel a little under the weather, you should be encouraged to go see the doctor and get every test. This should be find out what's going on. That's not our system at all. No. And understand at all. Like, let me give you a counterfactual. Mexico. So I'm on vacation in Chetumal, which is in southeastern Mexico, right by the border with Belize. And I had been spending a lot of time surfing, and the water reflects the sun. The sun's very intense. It's the tropics, and I got this huge inflammation in one of my eyes. So I'm like, oh God, this is driving me crazy. It hurts so bad. I don't know what to do. The hotel guy goes, oh, you got to go to the clinic, to the government clinic. Being American and completely bigoted about like other countries' healthcare systems, I'm thinking, oh God, rural Mexico, medical clinic. It's a national holiday and a Sunday, right? Trifecta of horror. But I'm so miserable, I decided to chance it, right? So I walk in. First of all, zero wait, straight in, whisked away, and then they're like, oh, it's your eye. Oh yeah, we have an ophthalmologist here, like waiting. I'm like, what do you mean, on call? No. And when you go down the hall, you realize there's a specialist in every room. Every office has, like a urologist and everything. They're there. National holiday on Sunday. They're waiting for people to come in just in case. I get the ophthalmologist sees me. She gives me a patch. She assigns me some medication. She prescribes some medication. She apologizes because her English isn't that great. She shouldn't have to speak English. She's in a Spanish-speaking country, but she speaks a little English because there are tourists there. Okay, I mean, what? And then
my English isn't very good either. So
yeah, well, and she gets. Then she's like, I'm like, oh God, I have to go to the pharmacy. She's like, I apologize. You're going to have to pay for, at the pharmacy. I'm like, where's the pharmacy? She's like, oh, it's in the lobby of the hotel, of the clinic here. So I'm like, so they have it right there. And the guy's like, I'm very sorry, but because you're not a Mexican national, you have to pay out of pocket. It was $4. And so I'm like, this is a healthcare system.
Yeah.
I like this healthcare system. I want this healthcare system.
You're selling me. You're selling me on it.
Yeah, I'm in. I've gotten sick in other countries. I got sick in Turkey, had a very bad asthma attack. Same sort of thing. The ambulance came to got me. They put me on oxygen. They brought me to the hospital in Istanbul, opposite side of town. They took me to a place that was specialized in pulmonary issues. It's like, they're like, again, they apologize. They're like, this is going to cost like $12. If you were Turkish, of course, it wouldn't cost anything. And I'm like, okay, how is it that a country that's in the middle of an economic crisis with 120% annual inflation rate, how come they can do this and we can't?
Because there's no incentive. I mean, it's like I said yesterday, I work in healthcare. This is my world. Most people go to the emergency room, which is the most expensive form of care that there is, because they cannot afford to go to a primary care. I mean, that's just reality. That's the system that we're in. And whenever I talk to people about this, I am convinced that the entire idea is to trap people with debt. I think that that's what it's all about, because you're going to an emergency room because you cannot pay for the Theraflu that you have to go to at an urgent care clinic, have to pay the deductible and all this other crap. So what do? You go to the emergency room. You wait there for 8, 10, 12 hours. You get the most expensive form of care that there is. You can't pay the bill, goes onto your credit record. You are completely screwed at that point. They've got their hand around your neck financially. That's our system. I'm convinced of it.
Well,
I'm convinced of it.
It's horror. So, all right, as promised, we're a little bit over here, and I've been trying to get the time of the show down to about an hour. So, as promised, I want to answer Star Lion's question. Star Lion has many questions, and we can only really do one at a time. Hope that's okay. It's going to have to be. So anyway, so Star Lion is I don't know what gender he, she, or they are, but here's the answer to your question. They wanted to know, was it true, or I have mentioned many times in the past that when I was fired from the LA Times, that the LAPD owned the LA Times, and it is true. And so let me explain sort of very briefly how that worked. I was the cartoonist at the LA Times from 2009 to 2015. And during that time, like any cartoonist would, I did cartoons about the local police. The LAPD is kind of a notorious police force. At that time, they were literally operating under a federal consent decree due to the Ramparts scandal. For people who are from Southern California, they're familiar with what I'm talking about.
What's the Ramparts scandal?
So the Ramparts division was basically part of the LAPD, and they had all sorts of, between quotas and financial corruption, all the cops were basically on the take, and and also they were brutally abusing all people of color that were coming into their clutches. So it was a shit show. It was a giant violation of civil rights. And so the DOJ stepped in and was running the LAPD for a little while there. So anyway, LA Times during that time was spinning out in a big way. At one point, I was getting my paychecks from a holding company because they were in Chapter 11. So the LA Times was owned by Tribune Publishing. Tribune Publishing was a chain that owned 15 newspapers, including the Baltimore Sun, the Tampa Tribune, not the Tampa Tribune, I believe it was the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel, a bunch of other papers, the biggest of which was the name of the company, Chicago Tribune. So based in Chicago. So anyway, unbeknownst to me, 1 year before I got fired, in 2014, the LAPD pension fund, which was worth about $16 billion and has lots of investments in lots of things, decided to purchase controlling interest in the parent company of the LA Times, which was Tribune Publishing. And then they installed their own publisher, this guy named Austin Butner, who had previously had an unsuccessful run for mayor of Los Angeles, and is a multi-billionaire. And they installed him as the publisher of the LA Times to basically do their bidding. In 2015, and by the way, they were pretty brazen about this. They had previously purchased controlling interest in the San Diego Union Tribune back in 2009. And at the time that they did it, the LAPPL, the Los Angeles Police Protection League, which is the police union, had issued a statement that appeared in the LA Times saying that since they owned the paper, they reserved the right to fire and replace the editorial board and control the editorial direction of the newspaper, right? So no Chinese wall whatsoever. It's basically the San Diego Union Tribune was to become like the LAPD Times, basically. So they now 5 years later, they buy the LA Times as well as the San Diego Union Tribune, indirectly by purchasing Tribune Publishing. And they basically told Austin Butner, their little butt boy, please get rid of Ted Rall because he makes mean cartoons about the police chief, who was Charlie Beck, who was a corrupt LAPD chief who ended up having to resign in scandal, and they did. And not only, but it wasn't enough to fire me. They also wanted to make sure I never worked anywhere else again. So I'm not going to get into all the details because time is limited, and I could do this someday if people care. I'm not sure they do care, but they decided to smear me in the pages of the LA Times so that my journalistic career would be ruined. I sued them, and it dragged on through the courts all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I think I won the moral victory, but I didn't win the legal victory because, as lots of people can attest when they've been the victim of lawfare, the system is rigged against people like me. So ultimately, the LAPD pension fund sold their share in the Tribune Publishing to a guy named Dr. Pat Soon-Shiong, who purchased the LA Times completely from Tribune. He's the sole owner now. He also owns the San Diego Union Tribune as well. So that's the ownership. To tell you how elites don't change, Dr. Pat decided to keep the lawsuit going that had started under the LAPD period, and so nothing really changed. And I got to tell you, with God as my witness, I'm watching Austin Butin wants to be mayor of LA or maybe governor of. I could see him making a run for Gavin Newsom's seat as governor of California very easily. He really wants that. And I'm waiting for him. I've got my entire book already written about this whole thing with all the details. I've got the dirt on Gavin. I've got the dirt on Austin Butner. And it's a sordid story. I mean, it involves the guy who was it involves this guy who was a attorney who ended up being corrupt. He was the guy who won the God, what's that lawsuit? The PG&E suit. Why am I forgetting this? You know, the movie about with Julia Roberts where she's the lawyer and they sue the
Superfund site.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, why is it not coming to my mind? Anyway, so because I'm still sick and trying to get over it. Anyway, long story short, so I have lots of so the dirt is there, but basically yes. And, you know, it's not illegal for a police pension fund to buy a newspaper. There's no law. Yeah, it's Aaron Brockovich. So he represented Aaron Brockovich. And his name was Tom Girardi. Tom Girardi is Google him. He was married to Erica Jane, a real housewife of Beverly Hills. He stole hundreds of millions of dollars from his clients. And it's pretty gross stuff. He had an affair going on with my judge in my case, and he was also best friends with the police chief who I mentioned, Charlie Beck. I mean, LA is so incestuous. It's like run like a small Alabama town. You know,
Sure.
It's there's no opposing interests like in a city like New York where there are different factions among the elites. There's really just one old boys club there.
Do you think that Kamala Harris will make a run for governor of California now that her presidential bid is over? Because I mean, she could slide in. Gavin Newsom, he's in free. He could run in the next election, right?
She could. Yeah, I mean, it would be teed up. It would be pretty easy. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the problem is there's probably more grift to be had. You know, sort of going the Obama and Clinton route, forming a foundation as your slush fund, and then you know,
but she's smart enough to do
for
that.
$1 million a shot.
Like what you said before is you haven't really seen any evidence of her intelligence, and I haven't seen that either. And it seems like that you have to be at least have a certain amount of smarts to run a con job. Maybe running a state's easier.
Indeed. So I don't know. I mean, running it is a big state. But you look, Gavin Newsom doesn't seem like the brightest, hardest working guy in the world, and you know, there he is. He seems to be able to get away with it.
Yeah, who knows?
All right, so we're gonna bring us out here. Let me do all of the closeout and thank everybody so much. Please subscribe to the TMI show on Rumble or on YouTube. If you're on Rumble, you have the option of becoming a paid subscriber for $5 a month, or just doing it for free. On YouTube, it's just for free. So either way, please do it. Please spread it around. Honestly, please go on your socials and either retweet or whatever, everything that we are doing. I'm on Blue Sky as well as X. I'm not one of those people who think I went away from. By the way, I don't even understand parenthetically all the lefties who are saying like, you know, X became shitty under Musk. Under Musk, I finally was able to get dethrottled as a lefty. So I don't know what they're talking about. I think this is like not based on anything real, but of course my experience could just be individuated. So you don't know about that. Anyway, if you like what you see and what you're watching here and you find any value, please help us by subscribing and please donate, right? Otherwise the show just cannot go on. Click on the button right below the Rumble chat to help support the show. And please generally support independent and news and content creators anywhere you find them. Thanks so much to Putinbot Gaming, aka Robbie West, for your
Who's that
support
guy?
and for moderating the chat. And of course, for co-hosting and filling in for Manila Chan. Manila Chan, if you're listening, or even if you're not, please just get better. Keep sleeping. She's like, why do they sleep? Sleep is the best medicine. Well, I'd say in the United States, it's the only medicine, as we previously said. Anyway, please check out the gaming channel.
Yeah, and can I say something real quick, Ted?
Please.
So for those of you who are watching on Rumble, if y'all please do me a favor, because I do a lot of the work on the back end. If y'all hop over to YouTube and go through and click that like button and then share the stuff, because the more engagement that videos have, the higher up YouTube is going to start boosting the channel. And so that is a way that you can help Ted Manila out. Doesn't cost you a nickel. And we're almost to the 500 subscriber mark. That's when people could actually start donating on YouTube. The magic number, though, is 1,000 subscribers. That's when they actually start getting ad revenue. So if y'all can do that, it is a huge help. It's really the biggest way that you can help. And if you have multiple YouTube accounts, do it with all of them. That's all I got.
Okay, and that's it. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you Monday. We'll let you know what's going on with Manila. Follow us on X and everywhere else. And see ya. Have a great one.
Bye, y'all.